Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Dead Man Walking podcast. I'm your host, repeatedly dead Fred, author of the medical trauma memoir, The Summer I Died 20 Times, which is what actually happened to me. And that's how I got the name Repeatedly Dead Fred. Today, I am with possibly my most famous guest ever. The, I don't know, I feel saying you're a Canadian icon just doesn't cover it because you've done so many things. So you had a TV show for like 30 years. I mean, that's phenomenal. Nobody has TV shows for 30 years. You're a writer. I think you've just got a book out
Mhm.
and columnist and designer and just general
Well, I'm not a
influencer.
designer. I'm not a designer. I did have several clothing lines and accessory
Uh-huh.
lines, but I didn't actually design those pieces. I was more of an editor. I worked with designers, so I can't take credit for that. And fashion television ran for 27 years. But
Okay.
appreciate the extra 3 years that you gave me.
Well, inflation rounding up. It's
Yeah, in fact,
yeah.
it was 3 decades, no question. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we have the amazing Jeanne Beker with us. And probably if you've bought clothes in the last 30 odd years in Canada, you know who she is because she's had an influence on it. So, Jeannie, thank you for coming on. And
Oh,
thank you.
you're
I think
welcome.
it's Brenley Carrington who connected us.
Yes, Brenly, a dear, dear friend, Brenly. She's such a lovely person. And I met her through the late, great Taller Cranston, who was
Oh,
my bosom buddy. And we shared that connection. She was very close with Taller as well. So
mhm.
Taller brought us together, and we've been great friends for quite a few years now.
Yeah. Toller's sister came on the podcast a while
Ah,
ago to publicize his book.
that's right.
So maybe we should talk about your book.
Yeah, okay. We'll talk about my book. My book, Heart on My Sleeve, Stories from a Life Well Worn, which was published this past fall by Simon and Schuster Canada. And it's stories from my life, not told in necessarily any chronological order,
Hmm.
but all these stories are told through the lens of wardrobe. Linda
Okay.
Evangelista, a famous supermodel, wrote the
Hmm.
foreword. Very, very chuffed at that.
Wow.
But these stories all start with a garment or an accessory, perhaps a piece of jewelry, and I use those pieces, as springboards for the storytelling. And
Hmm.
every story kind of winds up teaching a life lesson, or at least that's what I
Hmm.
was trying to do. With all the years that I have under my belt, I
Hmm.
thought, I might have a few life lessons to share. So great fun for anyone that appreciates wardrobe, for people that get sentimentally attached to these pieces. I've
Hmm.
held on to so many of. I don't own still all these pieces. Some of them have just, I don't know, departed
Hmm.
my closets. However, many of these pieces I do still have, and working on actually a big exhibit that will be presented at the newly renovated Glenbow Museum in Calgary when that
Hmm.
opens next year, a retrospective of my career.
How
And that
cool is that?
retrospective will include many of these wonderful garments that I talk about. So if you want to see a real authentic fashion show, the Glenbow will
Hmm.
be the place to be.
Okay. So going back to create this book, this memoir, say you've got 30 life lessons that you sprinkle throughout the book. How tough was it to get rid of or to not choose the other 30, which were probably also as amazing?
Well, the great thing about this, Fred, about the creating this kind of a, let's call it a template for the book, was that if I didn't have an article of clothing or an accessory to tie into the story, I
Hmm.
just thought, you know what, I'll leave that story for another book. So that's really what drove me and helped me edit the stories that I chose to tell. This is not my first memoir.
Hmm.
I've had three. This is my third memoir. I always say if you live long enough, you get to write a lot of memoirs.
That's pretty impressive for 39 years old.
I actually, in a few days from now, I'm celebrating my 73rd birthday. So very
Oh,
excited about
congratulations.
that. Thank you. And I really think that every decade or so, you do get older and wiser and need that opportunity to reflect and see things in different ways. So a couple of these stories I've actually told in previous books, but I put a new spin on them this time around. And yeah, just quite a privilege to be able to share stories. I always say the most precious gifts that we can give one another are our own personal stories. So,
Mhm.
just kind of heart swelling to think that I can tell these stories and that they resonate with people.
Well, isn't that sort of the basis of fashion? Like you can take something that was really cool a few years ago and just put a tweak on it and it becomes a whole new essence.
That's an interesting metaphor for the process. Yeah, the way we revisit these older garments now with vintage shopping is all the rage, and everyone loves to
Mhm.
go thrifting and finding these previously worn garments or gently used garments and pre-loved garments, and really reinvent them and present them in new ways. It's always about the way we mix things up and the way we choose to present ourselves to the world via fashion. I mean, I always say that's the one creative thing that everybody gets to do every day. I mean, some do it better than others, but you get
Mhm.
to put your outfits together. You get to
Mhm.
choose, what shirt you're going to wear with, what pair of pants or, what accessory. It's so I really love that. And we're the only animals, the only creatures on the planet that do that.
Mhm.
I mean, I know some
Mhm.
people dress up their doggies and stuff, but for the most part, we really are the only creatures that dress. So it's a great
Mhm.
celebration of self for sure.
So is it difficult for you to get up and decide what outfit you've probably got, I don't know how many closets.
Yeah,
And
it's true, but so much of it's dictated by mood. So it's not
Mhm.
really that hard when you know what mood you're in or what mood you want to be in, because I think fashion has great transformational powers as well and can really, lift us sometimes when we're not feeling that great about ourselves. It's such a funny thing because fashion can also victimize us, if we put
Mhm.
something on that we really aren't into and we really don't feel that great about ourselves, and our
Mhm.
confidence is sort of very low. That's uh that's bad, but at its best, yeah, clothes really can and fashion in general can really lift us up where we belong, and I appreciate it for that.
So maybe the psychologists and psychiatrists should stop prescribing drugs and they should start prescribing ensembles.
Yes, exactly. And give us nice, healthy credit cards to use to
Mhm.
access all that stuff.
Mhm. So, was there a pivotal moment when you were a child where it just said, "Fashion is my life.
Hmm.
That's the track I'm going to go down."
Yeah, well, listen, I did not set out to be a fashion journalist at
Mhm.
all. I grew up in the 60s. Any girl growing up in the 60s, I think, was in love with fashion. That was a great time for fashion and time for
Mhm.
revolutionary fashion in a sense. It was the first time that we weren't dressing the way our parents dressed. We had our own
Mhm.
way of presenting ourselves. The guys grew their hair long and the girls wore their skirts short. And it was a
Mhm.
wonderful time to be a bit of a rebel in fashion. My mom made all our clothes. Like for me and my sister, she
Oh
had a sewing
wow.
machine. She was very crafty. We didn't have a lot of money, so there was no way we're going to go out and buy these designer clothes. And a lot of these really cool looks weren't even available in Toronto. We
Mhm.
have to travel to like Buffalo or south of the border somewhere to find these things. So my mom had a subscription to Vogue magazine and Harper's Bazaar, and my sister and I would pore over these pages and just dream and
Mhm.
suggest that, hey, maybe mommy could make this or maybe mommy could make that. And then we would go to Stitsky's, which was a big fabric store in downtown Toronto, and we
Mhm.
would find the fabrics and we would find the patterns, and my mom would get to work and she made us the coolest clothes. But when you're asking, even before that, so that was kind of during my teenage years, but even as a small girl, I played with cutout dolls, paper dolls,
Hmm.
and they were very popular back in the day. I used to have really long hair, and when I
Hmm.
got out of the bath, it was just such a drag for my mom to have to brush that hair because I'd be screaming and very,
Hmm.
crotchety about it. But she would get me these beautiful cutout books that many of them featured celebrities of the day,
Hmm.
people like the Lennon sisters who were stars on the Lawrence Welk show, or I
Oh
had
wow.
all kinds of Donna Reed, I remember, and anyway, I had all these great cutout books of celebrities, and I would sit there, and my older sister would help me, cut out the costumes, and we would dress up these paper dolls, and it kept me occupied as my mom, brushed my very long waist length hair. And I think that's when I realized what a charm fashion could have, and how you would put a different dress on a paper doll and she was ready to go out on a whole new adventure, and whatever she was
Hmm.
wearing would dictate the kind of adventure she'd have. So, and then I had a Mitzi doll, which was a knockoff of Barbie, because my mom
Hmm.
could afford the Barbie dolls were really too expensive when they first came out, back in, I think it was 1959. She bought me a Mitzi, which was like really a cheap knockoff, kind of a tawdry version of Barbie. And my mom made all the clothes for Mitzi from the leftover scraps of material that she used to make our clothes with. And my Mitzi just had the best wardrobe. And I soon realized that she was even better than Barbie because she was a true original, and how
Hmm.
being a true original was really cool, coming up with your own ideas for clothing rather than just, buying what was available to you.
There's a YouTuber named Azzy, who I don't know if this is her work, but or she just did a reaction video on it, but
Mm-hmm.
she did the history of Barbie
Mm-hmm.
and how like it's just like every year another type of Barbie. It's just a little tweak, a little tweak.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty amazing, just the way fashion works.
Yeah.
So, did your sister also choose a fashion career?
No, my sister, but remember this, Fred. I mean, I don't. Yes, I did. Oh, I did a lot of work in the trenches of fashion, but I never
Hmm.
thought of myself as a fashion journalist with a capital J. I was an
Hmm.
entertainment reporter because
Hmm.
first of all, I was an actress. I started acting professionally when I was a teenager. At the age of 16, I got my ACTRA union card and did a sitcom on the CBC, and then did commercials and bits and movies, and went to study acting in New York, and did a lot of children's theater, and I studied mime in Paris. I got a job in the media in the mid 70s when I moved to St. John's, Newfoundland, because
Hmm.
there was very little work for mime artists there. So I was the only mime artist in the province. I end up in radio, go figure. It's a bit of
Hmm.
a newfie joke. But I ended up wanting to tell people stories and expose artists and talk about the arts. And then, a few years later, when I moved back to Toronto and got a job with City TV, I was an entertainment reporter and did a show called The New Music, which was, wow, great. I was meeting all my music idols from when I was a kid. And certainly that was the beginnings of Much Music. So we founded Much Music, and that we got to do a lot of incredible trailblazing. So fashion just sort of, I was just looking for the next big thing. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, this looks like a great arena. It's filled with drama. It's filled with characters who are larger than life. It makes for great eye candy. And that's sort of how I got into the fashion thing. My sister was always, so I, as a child, always wanted to be a performer. I mean, initially, early on, I
Hmm.
wanted to be a ballerina, as most young girls did at the time. But I really wanted to be out there performing. My sister was the more intellectual one, my older sister, very, very brilliant woman. And she decided that she wanted to be a writer. And she started, she was actually an entertainment critic for a while, writing for papers like the Montreal Gazette and the old Toronto Telegram and the Toronto Star. I mean, for many, many years. And then she moved to LA and she got a master's degree in English. And she started teaching screenwriting because she had also
Hmm.
worked on several screenplays, and so she that's what my sister did. She became a professor at Loyola Marymount University in the Department of Film, and she was there for many years and just retired last year.
Oh.
So that she took more of the academic kind of approach, and she was like a great
Hmm.
teacher. I was always about being out there. I always wanted to put myself out there for
Hmm.
whatever reason. I just wanted to be famous, rich and famous. The rich didn't really happen, but the fame kind of happened. So that's nice, at least in this country.
So I asked ChatGPT who would be the Jeanne Beker equivalent in the US
Oh,
because
wow. Okay. Who
because
was
you
it?
are known for your wit and I don't know, directness maybe?
Okay, I'll take that.
Do you want to take a guess who they suggested?
Oh, this is a good one. Oh, Lord, let's see. Miss Piggy.
No. Tim Gunn was on the list.
Oh, Tim Gunn. Well, because of the fashion world, yes. And I know Tim, and
Hmm.
he's a lovely man.
Hmm.
That's interesting. I don't necessarily see him as my,
Hmm.
American counterpart, but all right.
Hmm.
Was that it? Was that the
No,
one?
well, the number one person was actually Joan Rivers.
Well, that's great because, as you might know, for the past 10 years, have hosted a show on the shopping channel,
Hmm.
TSC, called Style Matters with Jeanne Beker. And Joan worked at the shopping channel for many years before she passed, selling her lines of clothing and accessories. So there's even one of our green rooms at the shopping channel is called the Joan Rivers room. So I was always mad for Joan Rivers. I mean, wow, what a brilliant woman. That's quite an honor to be there alongside her. I don't think I was anywhere near as quick-witted as Joan was, but
Hmm. I
that's
don't think
fun.
many people were. Uh, Mark Breslin from Yuck Yucks was very close with her. He had worked with her.
Yeah, I
Just,
love Mark.
just the nicest woman you could ever meet.
Nicest, unpretentious, really, yeah, down to earth, and as you said, direct.
Hmm.
Honest, authentic. I mean, these are all the things that I would love my brand to stand for, my personal brand.
Hmm.
No
Well,
BS.
I think it does.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
thanks for doing that research, Fred. That's very sweet.
Well, as I mentioned before we started recording, I try and bring up something that you've possibly never been asked. And that's
Mm.
pretty hard because you've done so many of these. So if I can get one or two of those in an interview, I'm very happy. So here's another obscure question. If you could describe your personal style as a sandwich or a meal, what would it be?
Ah, as a sandwich or a meal?
Yeah,
So when you
your
say as
pick.
a
Anything
meal,
in
it would have
between.
to be like all kinds of different ingredients and all kinds of different courses, perhaps, if you're talking about a meal.
Well,
That might be
if
a
you
little too
want to go in layers, sure.
or a sandwich, or maybe like a thing that you would just gobble up.
Yeah, a nosh.
Ah, a nosh. Well, I don't know, kind of a cross between a bowl of popcorn. I'm addicted to popcorn. When I write, I
Mm-hmm.
have to have a big bowl of popcorn beside me. I'm always.
Mm-hmm.
And and a hot dog. A hot dog with mustard, relish, and sauerkraut. That definitely is my idea of a good time. Although I know it's really not good for you, so I try not to eat too many of them. But even a veggie dog, maybe
Mm-hmm.
something that basic. And yeah, I really wouldn't describe it in any fancy way like a exotic dessert or anything. I mean, I'm pretty much no nonsense, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to be comfortable, and have a bit of a pop, I guess, to to my my effect on people. You want people to
Hmm.
remember you. You don't want to be that, boring and, like a piece of milk toast or something. But anyway, I think I'd go for, a lack of pretension to me
Hmm.
is a very valuable quality to have.
I like that. I think a lot of people try too hard to, especially now in social media. Um, and
100%.
I've been
Yeah.
told that now for women, there's a trend of modest wear that's coming back.
What do you mean by modest wear?
Well, like not quite hijabs, but uh, more covered up.
Oh, cover. Oh, okay, maybe. I don't know, but some of the outfits I've seen on red carpets lately,
Yeah.
all about sheer and letting it all hang out, and a little much too much, if you ask me. Not
Hmm.
a prude of any sort. I mean, I did get up on stage in 1969 with Ronnie Hawkins at a Toronto pop festival, dancing, in a bikini top. So I used to like to show it off, and but yeah, modesty. It might be indicative of the times. I think that fashion is a great barometer of our
Hmm.
time. It's a great reflector of what's going on in society, a great mirror in a sense, and so you have to look at what's going on in the world and then try to interpret that. And if it's modesty, as you say, that people are talking about now, maybe it is time to pull back a little bit. I think we're not feeling as safe. I think we're all feeling a little vulnerable.
Hmm.
So that would be a way of, retreating perhaps. And that makes sense for what society is going through at this
Hmm.
particular point in time. I mean, I'm also seeing a lot of dazzle, though, a lot of glitz and glamour and
Hmm.
celebration, just because we see fashion often as a form of escape. And I think we all want to escape, and we all are, wanting to put our best foot forward these days, and we all want to, forget about a lot of the darkness that surrounds us and try to shine a little light in our
Hmm.
personal spaces. So interesting when you really, yeah, sit back and think of, how much fashion can really say about us.
Hmm. So maybe that's also a recommendation for our political leaders is chill a bit, dress in casual stuff.
I tell you, listen, I used to see Donald Trump at every New York Fashion Week. I mean, he was always there, especially like front row at Michael Kors.
Hmm.
Then he would show it with Melania, of course, and she is quite the fashion plate. And I would, shove my
Did you
microphone
say
on the
plague?
plate,
Oh,
fashion plate. Yeah, that's an
okay.
expression.
Much better
Fashion
than
plate.
plague.
Oh gosh, no, she's quite gorgeous. And I would, be running after Donald, the Donald, as the late Ivana used to call him, and asking him about fashion, and he would, mostly defer to Melania. Oh, you should ask my wife, as she has a great fashion sense. And Melania wasn't very verbose. I mean, she didn't really say too much, but it's funny when you think of, and this guy ends up being, the leader of the free world. Like, what? How did that happen? Anyway,
Hmm.
interesting. I don't want to get political, but
Right.
yeah, just for me, because I've seen it, because I've had conversations with Donald Trump about he started a modeling agency, back in the day, and we went to New York, we did a big sit down interview with him talking about his modeling agency, and and
Hmm.
now it's like, what? He's at the White House. How does that happen? Only in
Hmm.
America.
Yeah. It's amazing. Like, what hasn't he tried? Like, he's the entrepreneur's entrepreneur, it seems. So, um, and again, without getting political, if these tariff things go through, is that going to crush Canadian fashion?
Oh, it's horrifyingly terrible for Canadian fashion. Sure, it could, for sure. Already, I have many friends in the fashion business who are quite concerned, because, you know, our market is very small in this country, and
Hmm.
most designers or most people with a fashion business do dream about getting their product south of the border. We really want
Hmm.
that American market. And already it's such a struggle to keep prices down, especially for those who are trying to manufacture things here in this country.
Right.
To manufacture a quality garment and try, keeping your prices down. I mean, if we're going to sell those garments south of the border and we have to, add tariffs onto that, like, yeah, it's going to be a disaster. Very tough. Very, very, very tough indeed.
Yeah,
So,
I'm from Winnipeg originally, so we used to have quite the schmata business in
oh
Winnipeg.
yeah,
There
and
was
still
lots of
there's some
factories.
still some great labels coming out of Winnipeg. Yeah,
Yeah, I think Mondetta comes out of Winnipeg and Silver
Freed.
Jeans.
There's Freed, a great faux fur coat
Mhm.
company that's been around really for many years.
Mhm.
That's like one of my favorite labels. I wear Freed all the time. Yeah, it's a certain some of the was it Silver Jeans out of
Yeah,
Winnipeg.
I'm trying to think of his name.
Or
It
what
escapes me.
a great friend of mine who actually was for a while manufacturing my clothing line, a fellow by the name of Noah Stern from
Mhm.
Winnipeg. I think it was London Fog, that trench
Mhm.
coat company. I think that he was affiliated with that, and that's where that was produced. So yeah, great history.
My dad
Yeah,
and I had a few of those
fashion.
coats.
Yeah, I mean, Canadian fashion is, very interesting, and not a lot of people know a lot about it, sadly, and
Mhm.
about the history of it, but well worth
Mhm.
researching. Sadly, a lot of the companies, fell by the wayside.
Mhm.
Again, it's so hard to compete globally, and always trying to, scream a little louder because we're Canadians. We need people to
Mhm.
notice us, but we don't always have the bucks to market properly. So that's a
Yeah,
problem.
we scream louder and then we apologize for screaming louder. So, do you have your eye on any Canadian labels or designers that are you see as
Oh
up and
yeah, there
coming?
are lots. I don't like to name names because I don't want at this point, like I don't want to, call, but there are some great, really strong Canadian labels now that are getting attention, outside our borders as well, and that so many women swear by, and I just celebrate them all. It's got to be the toughest business. I mean, the toughest business. I mean, music business is hard enough, and you have to kind of, reinvent yourself with a new album every year or something, but in fashion, you got to put something out like not only twice. It used to be only twice a year. We had spring fashion, we had fall fashion. Now we've got all these different collections coming out all through the year. We've got
Mhm.
resort fashion and holiday fashion, and so all the designers are constantly being kept on their toes. It's a grueling business, and it turned into such a big business. And I really think I was lucky enough to cover fashion all those years with fashion television during a golden age of fashion, when there was just this great mashup of art and fashion and even music. But now I think big business really has sucked a lot of the artistry out of fashion. And there's this big
Mhm.
revolving door going around with all these big fashion houses. And that's sort of sad to see, because a lot of designers aren't even given a chance to prove themselves and to really develop their own signature in a way, and they're just like in and
Mhm.
out, back and forth. It's all run by big business. Yeah, it's kind of not a great time to be in fashion.
Mhm. Hopefully that'll change.
Well, everything the only constant in fashion is change, and the only constant in life is change. So yeah, things change, and I always try to be optimistic about where things might go, but yeah, kind of a rocky road at the moment. We'll see
Mhm.
how we fare.
Of all the celebs that you've met, and you mentioned people like Ronnie Hawkins, um, who was a legend himself. Do you have anybody that stands out for their fashion sense or them just
Oh, well, so many. I mean, you can read about
Mhm.
some of them in the book as well.
Mhm.
Obviously,
What a
Madonna.
segue?
Madonna has a great fashion sense. No
Mhm.
no question about that. I showed up though at an interview, and there's a story about it in the book. Wearing the same thing that she was wearing, and she was not happy about that. I thought it was great, but so many. It just the list goes on. There, obviously people in the entertainment world are very image conscious, And
Mhm.
most of them do have a great way of presenting themselves and put a lot of time and effort into the way they
Mhm.
present themselves. So, there's just so many great iconic style people. I couldn't say like who's your, biggest style icon, or who do you,
Mhm.
love the most in terms of their sense of style. I mean, too many to
Mhm.
name, but a lot of them both from, the worlds of fashion, like, some of the models, some of like Kate Moss, who is
Mhm.
actually a friend as well. And there's a chapter about her in the book. She has an amazing sense of style. Just personally, she collects vintage clothing and she struts it like nobody's business. I mean, she just has a great
Mhm.
eye. And then, beautiful people like, oh, they're just, I mean, they're just too many to mention.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of them out there, and I appreciate them all for their originality and their gutsiness. Sometimes, they
Mhm.
aren't afraid to put themselves out there in big, bold ways, and we lap it up.
Yeah, you have to be bold to be successful. So we're almost out of time, so I'm going to ask you more of a traditional question.
Okay.
So, what's next on your life adventure? You're
Well,
promoting the book.
yeah, I
You've
do my
got the
show. I'll
opening.
do that till the middle of May. We do it for 10 weeks, Style Matters on TSE every Thursday night. And that's great fun. I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements. I just shot a L'Oreal campaign in Montreal. That was great fun. I'm working on the big museum show with the Glenbow that I'm co-curating with Paul Hardy, a wonderful Calgary-based designer who's a dear friend as well. And that will be a big show, a really big show beyond just the fashion. I mean, it's a show that I'm really hoping will inspire the next generation to dream and believe and be fearless and be tenacious, because you can do whatever your heart desires, in this country, if you are willing to work for it, and if you just don't give up, and if you just, keep it going, and don't be afraid to compromise a little bit too. I mean,
Mhm.
that's part of it. Yes, I wanted to be a big movie star as a child, but that didn't really happen. But I still kind of, you know, realized a lot of my dreams, and still kind of get to taste that kind of a lifestyle, let's say. I
Mhm.
wanted a life of glamour. My parents are Holocaust survivors. So because
Okay.
their lives were kind of, nipped in the bud in their youth, and they didn't get a chance to realize so many of their dreams, I felt, geez, I've got to not only just have a good life or a great life, I've got to have a freaking fantabulous life. And,
Mhm.
so far, so good. I also went through a cancer journey a couple of years ago, and that was filled with silver linings, truly. I
Mhm.
mean, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's not a pleasant thing to go through. However, I learned so much about myself, and I became a bigger, better, bolder, stronger, braver, wiser person as a result.
Mhm.
I'm doing a lot of work with the Princess Margaret Cancer Center in Toronto, which is just an amazing place, one of the
Mhm.
top five cancer centers in the world, known for their research, and just a wonderful, wonderful place. So I'm doing a lot of work with them and hosting a lot of events that are, for the cancer community, for both support and research. Um, so yeah, like just tons of stuff going on, lots of interesting things, a couple of things that I can't really talk about, a couple of
Okay.
TV projects that we'll see, because in this business, you never really know, but a lot of
Mhm.
promising things. And, hey, I'm going to be 73 years old and I'm still able to work. And don't ever say, are you retired? I hate that. That's one of my most hated things when I run into people who maybe haven't kept track of me over the years, and they go, so are you retired now? It's like, you said a dirty word. For me anyway, I just
Mhm.
uh, as the great Oscar de la Renta has said to me, when you rest you rust, and I don't want to get anywhere near rusty, so
Mhm.
no plans to rest too much in the next little while anyway.
Well, that's fantastic. And I have to echo your thoughts on coming through your medical trauma, bigger, better, bolder, wiser, and just a better human being. And that's exactly what's happened to me through my medical adversity. And it's the blessing and the curse, right?
Yeah, truly, truly. I mean, it sounds like a cliche, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but absolutely. And I wouldn't trade my life journey in for anything really. I mean, I went through and listen, as a cancer survivor, we cancer survivors live from scan to scan. I think anyone will
Mhm.
attest to that. So you never really know what's around the next corner, but you just really learn to appreciate each and every day. And
Mhm.
everyone should be doing that and realizing that, because it is the reality for everyone, really. Like no one
Mhm.
knows what's going to happen to them in the next 5 minutes. But it's a kind of a life that lesson that really needs to be, hammered into people a lot, because I think a lot of people waste a lot of time and complain about a lot of stuff and just aren't grateful for the wondrous small things in their lives, because they got a chip on their shoulder, or they're steaming or brewing about. I really believe forgiveness is also a very important thing to do, and don't
Mhm.
hold grudges, and don't let negativity eat you up. I mean, I know it sounds a little Pollyanna-ish maybe, but I just try to be as positive as I can every day and truly live in the light.
I think that's a great place to close, but I also think Zoom's going to cut us off.
Okay.
So could you log back in for a sec and we'll just do a proper wrap?
Okay, so what do you want me to do? Shut down here, leave,
Zoom's
and
going to shut down
come back? Okay, so
in
I'll
5,
leave.
and then you
Okay,
just use
I
the same link.
leave and then go back to the same link.
Yeah.
You don't have to send me a new link, right?
No,
Okay,
absolutely
all
not.
right. Okay,
Okay,
I'll see you in a
thanks.
bit. Okay, bye.
So, as some of you in the audience know, I'm not great at keeping to my time limits on Zoom. So, that's where the miracle of editing will come in. So, Jeannie, you were just, I don't know, it was just an amazing bit of advice for people that you closed with, and especially about forgiving and not holding grudges. And that just, it's the opposite of what you were saying about clothing setting the mood for your day. And I
Why was it
think,
the opposite? What do you mean by that?
well, when people hold grudges and don't forgive people, it's it's like putting on clothes that you don't like. It just that's it sets your life tone for
You're right. It's
everything.
not a comfortable way to move through the world, for sure. But
Mhm.
listen, we all have one thing that can never be taken away from us, and
Mhm.
that's our choice of attitude. I mean, Viktor Frankl, the great writer, writes about that in Man's Search for Meaning. Great
Mhm.
Holocaust survivor who was just a brilliant, brilliant guy. Or
On my
Dr.
nightstand.
Egar. Dr. Edith Egar, a wonderful psychologist who survived the Holocaust, she's lived to a ripe old age, bless her, and she wrote a
Mhm.
book called The Choice. We all have that choice to either stay in the light or live in the darkness. Attitude. No one can take that from you. And I always say, if you can't change the situation, change your mind, or at least
Mhm.
try to. It's not always easy, definitely not easy. But if we don't have power over our mind, like what good are we? I
Mhm.
think that's really important to remember.
It is very important to remember. Well, Jeannie, thank you so much for coming on. It took us a while for us to connect. You are obviously a very busy lady, and I appreciate it. You want to close with anything?
No, just stay in the light. And here's to a fabulous spring. I'm very much looking forward to this spring. It's been not a good beginning to the year, and I'm just chomping at the bit
Mhm.
to leap into the spring season ahead. And the sunshine has started to surface in this city anyway. Or I'm in the countryside actually now, about an hour and a half outside of Toronto, and my country home, and
Mhm.
sun shining, and things are warming up. The snow's melting, and I think it's going to be a fabulous season ahead. So good
Good.
luck to everybody, and just yeah, dream, believe, don't be afraid, and never give up.
Love it. Jeannie Beker, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please like, subscribe, share, buy some of Jeannie's stuff on TSC. And Hopefully, we will see you next episode. Bye bye.
Okay, take good care, Fred. Bye bye.